Okay, so let's unpack this. We've all seen the movie version of the presidency, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Hollywood version.
Exactly. You know the scene. The president walks into the Oval Office, barks an order into, a secure phone, and suddenly aircraft carriers are turning
The
around.
stock market
The
shifts.
whole world just spins on a new axis. It's this ultimate power fantasy.
Hmm.
But I've been digging into the actual machinery of the office, the history, the constitutional source code, and I found this one question that just completely reframed it for me.
It's a question that sounds really simple, but the answer is incredibly messy.
The question was Donald Trump as powerful as he thought he was? And before anyone grips the steering wheel tighter, this is not a political thing.
No, not at all.
It's a structural question. Whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama, are they actually this leader of the free world with unlimited reach? Or are they just, a manager dealing with the world's worst bureaucracy?
That is the fundamental paradox we're diving into. We grow up with this myth of the president is an elected king. You see Mount Rushmore, those giant faces in stone looking so monumental.
Immovable.
Exactly. But the reality of the job is that the president is often the most constrained person in Washington. They are trapped in this web of checks and balances and just sheer administrative chaos.
So consider this your deep dive into the illusion of control. We're going to look at the job description, the weapons they have to fight Congress, the nuclear codes, and all the weird loopholes they use to get around the rules.
And figure out if the president is actually the most powerful person on earth or just the person with the biggest migraine,
I'd argue they're both.
usually at the same time.
So let's start at the very beginning, the job description, Article 2 of the Constitution.
Right. And if you actually read Article 2,
Mm.
it's shockingly brief. I mean, the Founding Fathers spent pages detailing what Congress can do.
Tax, spend, declare war.
Build post offices, you name it. But for the president, it's vague. It basically just says the executive power shall be vested in a president and then gives a short list of duties.
It feels like they were almost intentionally vague, like they were terrified of creating another King George.
That's exactly it. They wanted an administrator, not a ruler. But because it's so vague, every president since has been trying to figure out where the lines are. And that ambiguity leads to a daily schedule that is, frankly, schizophrenic.
I'm glad you brought up the schedule. I was looking at this breakdown of President Obama's calendar from September 2016, just a random 3-day window.
And it's not just busy, right? It's disjointed.
Oh, totally. Okay, so Monday, September 12th. At 11 a.m., he sits down for the Presidential Daily Briefing, the PDB.
Which is the highest level intelligence summary on the planet. Terrorist threats, economic collapses, loose nukes.
Heavy stuff. Then at 4:10 p.m., he's in a meeting with congressional leadership, probably arguing about a budget. Standard governing.
Standard but exhausting.
But then look at Tuesday. He flies to Philadelphia for a Hillary for America campaign rally. So now he's a cheerleader.
The partisan in chief.
Then he flies to New York for a fundraiser, then back to D.C., and the very next morning, he's hosting a bilateral meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi of Burma to discuss human rights.
And this is what makes the American presidency unique and you could argue kind of broken.
How so?
In almost every other democracy, these jobs are split. You take the UK, you have the head of state, which is the monarch, King Charles. He cuts ribbons, hosts dinners, comforts the nation.
He's the symbol.
He's the symbol. Then you have the head of government, the prime minister. They're the ones in the mud arguing over tax policy and running the bureaucracy.
But in the U.S., we ask one person to do both jobs.
Exactly. We expect the president to be this ruthless CEO of the government and the national priest. We want them to negotiate nuclear treaties in the morning and then, cry with us in the evening.
That national priest role, the textbook calls it the comforter-in-chief, that's a really powerful tool, though.
It is.
I think about George W. Bush on the rubble at Ground Zero with the bullhorn, or Obama tearing up after the Sandy Hook shooting.
That emotional labor is a huge source of informal power. When Bush stood on that rubble, his approval ratings went through the roof. The country unified.
Right.
But, and here's the catch, that emotional connection doesn't legally let him do whatever he wants. He still had to go back to D.C. and deal with Congress.
Which brings us to the tool belt, because eventually the speeches end and the president actually wants to pass a law, and that's where they hit a brick wall.
And the wall is Congress.
Mm.
The president really only has one blunt instrument to smash through it, the veto.
The power of no, just return to sender.
It's effective. I mean, since George Washington, presidents have used the regular veto over 1,500 times. but it's a defensive weapon. It stops things. It doesn't create them.
There's a sneakier version, though. The pocket veto. Sounds like something a magician does.
It's basically legislative ghosting. So here's how it works.
Oh.
The president has 10 days to sign a bill. If Congress is in session and he does nothing, it becomes law. But if Congress goes on break, they adjourn before those 10 days are up, and the president does nothing, the bill just dies.
So he just puts it in his pocket and walks away.
Exactly. And the kicker is, because Congress isn't there, they can't override it. It's a total kill shot.
Oh, with a regular veto, Congress can fight back.
They can, but it is incredibly difficult. You need a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate.
That's a huge hurdle. Getting 2/3 of politicians to agree on lunch is hard enough.
It is, but it happens. And there was this massive example right at the end of the Obama presidency that shows just how complicated this gets. The JASTA bill.
The Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act?
Right, this was in September 2016.
Yeah.
The bill allowed families of 9/11 victims to sue the government of Saudi Arabia for their alleged role in the attacks.
Which sounds, on the surface, like something no one would oppose. Who wants to vote against 9/11 families?
Politically, it's impossible to vote against. But Obama vetoed it. He argued that if the U.S. starts allowing lawsuits against foreign governments, then other countries will strip away our sovereign immunity.
And start suing the U.S. for our military actions abroad.
Exactly. He saw it as a diplomatic nightmare.
So you have the head of government thinking about international law clashing with the head of state role where the country wants justice for victims.
And in that case, the emotion won. Congress looked at the optics, looked at the families, and they crushed the veto. It was a stark reminder that the president isn't a king.
But when they do get a win, they make sure we all know about it. The signing ceremonies are total theater. I was looking at the details from the Affordable Care Act signing in 2010.
It was a production, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. He invited the widow of Senator Ted Kennedy, who had fought his whole life for health care. He invited an 11-year-old boy whose mother had died because she lost her insurance.
He used that head of state ceremonial power to cement a head of government legislative victory. It's smart politics.
It is. But there's one power in the tool belt that is not about optics, and Congress can't touch it. The get-out-of-jail-free card.
The pardon. This is the one true monarch power in the Constitution. It is unchecked.
No one can reverse it.
No one. Not the Supreme Court, not Congress. And the history of how this gets used is just wild. We all know Ford pardoned Nixon.
Right, which probably cost him the election.
Probably.
Yeah.
But I was looking at the numbers for Bill Clinton versus George W. Bush. It's night and day.
Clinton's final day in office was a frenzy, right?
A complete frenzy. He issued 140 pardons in a single day. January 20th, 2001.
140.
140. And it was so controversial. The most famous one was Mark Rich, a billionaire commodities trader who fled the U.S. to avoid tax evasion charges.
He was on the FBI's most wanted list.
He was, but his ex-wife had made massive donations to the Clinton Library.
Oh, that looks transactional.
It looked terrible. But because the power is absolute, there was nothing anyone could do. Now compare that to George W. Bush. He was incredibly stingy. In 8 full years, only 189 pardons total.
So Clinton did almost as many in 24 hours as Bush did in 2 terms.
Wow. And Obama started out very restrained, like Bush. Only 70 pardons in his first 7 years. But then, as he was walking out the door, he granted 212 in his last month.
It seems like every president eventually realizes, wait, I have this magic wand.
We might as well use it before they take it away.
So we have the pen and the pardon, but we also have the sword. Let's talk commander-in-chief. This feels like where the paradox is strongest.
Absolutely. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war. That was a very specific choice. They didn't want one person dragging the country into battle.
So Congress says go, and the president says how.
In theory. But in reality, Congress hasn't formally declared war since 1941.
Wait, hold on. Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, those were wars.
In every practical sense, yes. But legally, they were military engagements or police actions. The last time the U.S. actually declared war was World War II.
So what changed? Did Congress just give up that power?
It's about speed. In the nuclear age, you don't have time for a committee to debate for 3 weeks when a missile is in the air. The world moves too fast. Which brings us to the most terrifying cassette in the world.
The nuclear football.
The emergency satchel.
I always pictured this as like a metaphor, but it's a literal briefcase.
It is a literal black leather briefcase about 45 pounds. carried by a military aide who is physically attached to the president 24/7. If the president gets on an elevator, the aide is on that elevator.
And inside are the codes?
Inside are the options for nuclear strike and the authentication codes, the biscuit, to prove the president is who he says he is. And this is the ultimate expression of that power paradox.
How so?
The president can't buy a stapler for the West Wing without Congress approving the budget, but he can unilaterally decide to end human civilization in about 6 minutes.
That's terrifying. But it makes a certain structural sense. You can't have a committee vote on that.
Right. But when we step back from the edge of apocalypse and look at normal diplomacy, the president hits those walls again. Treaties.
The president is the chief diplomat. The presidential seal, right? The eagle holds the olive branch.
And arrows for war. But he can't just sign a treaty and be done with it.
Yeah.
The Constitution requires 2/3 of the Senate to ratify it. And history is littered with presidents who forgot that.
Woodrow Wilson is the tragic example.
He's the cautionary tale.
Mm-hmm.
Wilson goes to Paris after World War I. He's treated like a messiah. He negotiates the Treaty of Versailles. He designs the League of Nations.
He thinks he saved the world.
He does. But he forgot to check in back home. He didn't bring any senators with him to Paris, didn't massage the egos. He brought the treaty home, and the Senate basically said, nope, we don't like it.
Imagine winning the World War and then losing the vote at home.
It broke him. He had a stroke trying to sell it to the public, and the U.S. never joined the League of Nations. It just shows you can be the most celebrated man in Europe, but if you can't count to 67 of the Senate, you're powerless.
Okay, so we've covered the expressed powers, the stuff written in ink, but then there are the gray areas. And this is where that king versus clerk debate gets really murky.
We call these inherent powers or emergency powers.
And we mentioned earlier that the president gets more powerful when things go wrong.
Right. When a president declares a national emergency, it unlocks a dormant set of superpowers. There are laws that allow the president, in an emergency, to seize control of the internet, freeze bank accounts, suspend certain laws.
That sounds like martial law.
It can feel like it. And here's the shocking statistic I found in the research. The United States is currently in a state of 30 simultaneous national emergencies.
30, right now.
Yes, as we speak. We are living under 30 active emergency declarations.
How is that even possible? The sky isn't falling.
Because once an emergency is declared, it's rarely undeclared. The oldest one still in the books dates back to November 1979.
The Iran hostage crisis.
The Iran hostage crisis.
But that ended over 40 years ago.
It did. But the emergency status remains to keep certain sanctions and asset freezes in place. So structurally, we are still in a state of emergency with Iran. These declarations just pile up, and every single one gives the president a little more authority.
So if we go back to our big question, was Trump, or any president, as powerful as they thought? It seems like the answer depends on whether it's a calm Tuesday afternoon or a global crisis.
Precisely. In day-to-day governing, trying to pass a bill, the president is weak. They have to beg Congress, cajole the public, deal with the courts. But in a crisis, their power expands dramatically.
It's almost like they have to find an emergency to be effective.
Which is a dangerous incentive structure, isn't it? If the system is designed to be slow and frustrating during peace, but fast and decisive during panic, you might be tempted to frame everything as a panic.
Before we wrap up, we have to talk about the understudy, the vice president, historically the most bored person in the world.
The backup quarterback. For most of history, the VP's job was, as one of them put it, not worth a bucket of warm spit.
I love that quote.
The Constitution only gives them 2 actual duties: preside over the Senate and break ties if the vote is 50-50.
And lately, that tie-breaking vote has become a huge deal.
It has. Dick Cheney, who's an incredibly powerful VP, broke 8 ties in 8 years. Mike Pence had to break a tie in his first month.
Wow.
It shows how polarized the Senate is. The VP can't just go to funerals anymore. They have to be on the Senate floor to save the president's agenda.
But the most critical part of the job is the 25th Amendment, the mechanism for when the president can't do the job.
And it's not just for if the president dies. It's for when they are incapacitated. We've seen this used in a very mundane medical way.
The colonoscopy transfer of power.
Exactly. Ronald Reagan in '85 and George W. Bush in 2002 and 2007. They had to go under sedation for routine procedures. So for a couple of hours, they formally transferred power to the vice president.
I just love the image of the world's only superpower handing over the nuclear codes because the president is getting a checkup.
It's funny, but it's also reassuring. It shows the system is obsessed with continuity. There can never be a single second where someone isn't in charge.
So let's zoom out. We've looked at the source code, the tool belt, the sword, the loopholes. What's the big picture takeaway?
The big takeaway is that the paradox of presidential power is real. We expect the president to fix the economy, lower gas prices, solve world peace, and heal our national soul.
But we give them a job description that forces them to ask 535 people for permission to do almost anything. It's a setup for disappointment.
It is. And the gap between what we expect the president to do and what they can actually do is where all the political frustration comes from.
And maybe that's by design. The founders didn't want an efficient government, they wanted a safe one. They preferred gridlock to tyranny.
Well put. They built a machine that is supposed to grind its gears.
So for everyone listening, here is the final thought to chew on. We often call the president the most important person in the world. But based on everything we've discussed today, do they rely more on the powers written in the Constitution? Or do they rely more on the informal powers they seize when the alarm bells start ringing?
It's the difference between the power you were given and the power you take. And history tells us most presidents eventually stop asking for permission and start taking.
A terrifying and fascinating thought to end on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure.